The Sega Master System debuted in 1986 in North America. Released as a direct competitor for the Nintendo Entertainment System, it marked Sega's first entry in the North American home console market. While the North American library consists of only 117 games, there are plenty that are worth playing whether you're new to the Master System or an avid fan. It was my first console, and it introduced me to gaming, which is why I've teamed up with another fan of the Master System. Coury from My Life in Gaming and myself have compiled a list of 10 games that every Sega Master System owner needs to have in their library.
By the time the Master System arrived in the US in 1986, the Nintendo Entertainment System had already captured the hearts and minds of thousands across the entire nation. Sega had an uphill battle right out of the gate, even if on paper, their system was more capable than the NES at a base hardware level. Yeah, many games looked better when compared side by side thanks to its slightly newer tech, but 1987 was looking pretty stacked with a volley of now iconic titles that would help cement Nintendo's place as market leader. But all that really doesn't matter. If you wanted to play Sega's arcade games at home, then you're going to want to have Sega's hardware for the best versions. When I was 9 years old, I wanted to play, I needed Space Harrier at home more than anything else. Once I finally got the Master System for Christmas in 1987, I was firmly in the Sega camp, even after my brother got an NES for his birthday nearly a year later. Master System games tend to have a pretty distinct look, sound, and feel when compared to Nintendo games of the era. Some would say it's better, others would say worse, but even now, you could say that they're probably not for everyone. I think that we put together a pretty good list here of some heavy hitters and some underappreciated classics of some of the best that the Master System has to offer, at least in North America. So, let's get started. Although it's a relatively early game on the console, Quartet is one of my favorite Master System games to this very day. This port of Sega's early System 16 title of the same name looks like a traditional run and gun at first glance, but it's kind of more of a search and destroy. You're not just moving from point A to B, but you'll have to seek out bosses, grab the key from them, and then locate the exit. Now, that exit might be right there, or way back at the start of the level. Throw in a jetpack for good measure, and you have a pretty solid mix for an action game in 1987. In the System 16 arcade original, the name Quartet made sense because you could play up to 4 players simultaneously. The follow-up, Quartet 2, was just the original game, but pared down to just 2 players. Although, you could still choose from a pool of 4 characters. So the name still made sense. At home, neither of these are true. You have 2 characters assigned to 2 players. In Japan, the game was even retitled to Double Target for the Mark III release, a name that makes much more sense. But if you want to know what makes Quartet truly special to me, the answer isn't the graphics or gameplay, it's the music. Even today, I'll hold steady that this is one of, if not the best soundtrack in the Master System's library, based on the first level alone. It's just too bad that most players won't even hear the full length of this tune, because it's a decent clip longer than the level that it's embedded in. Listen, this game deserves way more attention, and I think it's among the best on the system, and I think that every single person who owns the system should probably have it. If it doesn't really do anything for you, then, just go to the first level and just sit there and listen to the music until you run out of lives.
While the term Metroidvania was not yet coined in 1987, this style of gameplay applies to the incredibly underrated gem, Zilean. As a child, I was mesmerized by how futuristic and unique it was compared to the other games in my small library. In this platform shooter, you'll explore a large underground labyrinth filled with enemy soldiers, security turrets, and a sophisticated computer system as you search for your captured comrades. Zilean offers 3 different playable characters for your playthrough, each with different abilities. JJ is your starter and the jack of all trades. Apple can jump higher, which is key in this platform adventure, while Champ is the bruiser of all 3, being able to take more damage than the others. But while the characters offer different styles, what makes Zilean special is how far ahead of its time it was with the implementation of computer commands. As you explore room to room, you'll discover code commands that can be input into a nearby terminal. When put in the correct order, they will unlock the door to the next room, or carry out special commands like disabling sensors, warping to different areas, and even the ability to commit suicide. If you want an authentic experience, make sure you have a pen and some graph paper to map out this giant maze. While Zilean is an incredible game, the inspiration for it comes from one of the earliest anime adaptations in gaming. I enjoyed the game so much that I actually bought the Blu-ray collection of the Zilean anime. And this is coming from someone who doesn't really watch any anime. The game was that good. Zilean is no easy game. It's gonna take lots of time and memorization to complete it, especially that final portion of the game. But it all comes together to make an incredible experience. If you like Zilean, you can skip the sequel because it is nothing like the original.
When most people think of the Japanese developer Compile, they tend to think of the vertically scrolling shooter series Aleste, or a falling block puzzle you might have heard of called Puyo Puyo. What you don't tend to hear about are games like Govalius. Sega ported Compile's MSX game to the Master System in 1988 under the title Govalius: The Valley of Doom. Now, I'll just be upfront here. Govalius isn't exactly the greatest game ever. It's got a certain jank to it that was prominent in a lot of Master System titles at the time. The localization mixes an era-appropriate old-timey medieval thou hast language with some good old-fashioned broken English. But what Govalius is ambitious, offering 3.5 different types of gameplay. Side-scrolling platforming, Zelda-like overworld segments with 4-direction movement, and overhead hack-and-slash auto-scrolling segments. The half that I mentioned comes from boss fights, which play like the overworld segments, except you have full 8-way movement. Character and enemy sprites are among the best on the system just a couple of years into its lifespan, with some larger mini-bosses looking particularly impressive. Plus, if you got the hardware for it, like a Power Base Mini or an FM sound module mod, Govalius offers a really nice FM soundtrack. Although I typically prefer the system's coarser PSG sound for music, this is one example where I think the smooth Yamaha YM2413 FM synth does it better. Still, there's some questionable, if interesting gameplay mechanics at work here that I think make it unlike any game that I've played before, such as the side-scrolling levels forcing you to face forward at all times, and how each screen on the overworld requires you to kill a certain number of enemies so that you can talk to NPCs. Although each of these game mechanics achieve various degrees of success, I have to commend them for their ambition here, and that alone makes Govalius worth owning.
Lovers of JRPGs tend to think back on the beginning of them on home consoles with Final Fantasy or Dragon Warrior, but Sega developed and published a space fantasy epic that would satisfy any itch for adventure. Released in 1987, just 2 days after Final Fantasy's release on the Famicom, Phantasy Star became a must-own for all Master System lovers and a direct competitor in an emerging role-playing genre. Players explore dungeons in a 3D style manner and encounter enemies in a first-person style with detailed battle animations. Getting lost in a dungeon is easy, but it looks beautiful as the panels and tiles pass you by smoothly. You are not confined to just one planet, however. After working your way through some quests, you'll have access to a spaceship, allowing you to travel to 2 other planets throughout the star system to help liberate the galaxy from the clutches of an evil empire. The sprites of enemies and characters are impressive not only for their animation, but for their sheer size. Combining these elements along with a phenomenal soundtrack, it was easy to see how Phantasy Star became a pillar in creating a fan base for JRPGs in the West. Even if you aren't big into JRPGs, Phantasy Star is a game everyone should experience due to the innovation and impressive visuals of its time. You'll do some fair share of level grinding, but watching the story progress as you recruit new allies and learn new abilities is worth the long journey. Phantasy Star is one adventure that every Master System owner should take. And if you do want a deeper dive on the gameplay and plot of Phantasy Star, I do have a full retrospective on my channel about Phantasy Star, and it features John Sauer, the North American Sega Master System project manager, who was the first person to ever play Phantasy Star in the West.
Rebranding original Japanese developed games for licensing purposes in the US was commonplace in the 1980s. The Sega developed Ashura seemed custom tailored for the Rambo license. With Rambo First Blood Part 2 a box office success in 1985, it felt preordained. Obviously struck from a similar stone as Capcom's Commando and SNK's Ikari Warriors, I personally tend to think that I like Rambo better than either of these. However, it lacks both the speed of the former and the rotary aiming of the latter. So initially, it might not seem like anything special. Maybe it's the age I was when I played it with a friend, thanks to its 2-player simultaneous option, but you gotta admit, it seems a heck of a lot better than the NES ports of either Commando or Ikari Warriors. You're a 1- or 2-man wrecking crew armed with a machine gun and bow with explosive-tipped arrows. Rambo's movement might feel a bit sluggish at first, but it doesn't take long to get used to. The only real obstacle is that, like Govalius, you can't turn around completely for some reason. The game progresses through 6 levels, starting out in a jungle, passing through some ancient ruins, and then back into the jungle depths again, complete with urine-colored swamp water. Things get really nuts by level 5 as you enter a city and mow down legions of what appear to be deputy cops. If Ashura didn't predate the Rambo license, I would say that this is a deliberate callback to the first Rambo movie, First Blood. In fact, the only true connection to the Rambo license comes from the new title screen with a admittedly pretty impressively detailed digital Stallone and a great PSG rendition of the Rambo theme music. There's also some minor film cell type stills at the end of each level. You know, I've seen a lot of people rag on this game a lot over the last, 10 years or so, but personally, I've got a lot of love for it, and I think you should definitely have it in your library.
The Master System had a 6-bit RGB palette that could produce 64 different colors, 10 more than its direct competitor, the NES. One of the most beautiful colored games on the console is Shoplifter. Originally created for the Apple II computer in 1982 by Dan Gorlin, Shoplifter was ported to various computers and systems. But the Master System port in 1986 remains the best. In Shoplifter, your mission isn't to seek and destroy, but rather to rescue. Scattered across each level are enemy bases where prisoners are being held. Blow up the base, land the chopper, and watch them pile in before making your way back to headquarters. It felt different than most air and space combat games, as the focus wasn't to kill everything in sight, but to bring hostages to a safe haven. This launch title on the Master System showed off the capabilities of the color palettes that were splashed across the sky. Vivid blue, bright pinks, and cool teals dazzled in the background as you piloted your way through deserts, oceans, and caves. Shoplifter has a fair difficulty curve, as you can expect the action to be cranked up by level 3, giving you a fair challenge throughout the game. Engaging enemies fill the screen, whether it's enemy jet fighters, missile silos, tanks, battleships, submarines, or futuristic hovercrafts. Your mission to liberate hostages will not be an easy one. Shoplifter also features some pretty cool Easter eggs, as you might just see E.T. and Elliot on a bicycle, or perhaps Superman flying across the sky. If you're looking for something that you can pick up and play right away without much frustration, Shoplifter is a safe bet for plenty of fun. I always enjoyed seeing the brave little pilot wave to me on screen before he took off. Such bravery in the face of almost certain death, especially if I was piloting. Shoplifter is a launch title that is just as worthy as being in your Master System collection as it was when it released in 1986.
Wonder Boy. What began in the arcade as a little blonde kid throwing stone axes somehow grew into being one of the most convoluted game series ever, full of sequels, spin-offs, and reskins that got their own sequels. Trust me, it is more complex than it has any business being. Out of those, my heart has always been with the sub-series, Monster World. Wonder Boy and Monsterland, the second game in the overarching series, but first in the sub-series, appeared in the arcade in 1987. Both versions have their fans, but I'll go on record and say that the home port is significantly more accessible and enjoyable than the arcade game. It's pretty much a complete departure from what was established in the original Wonder Boy, outside of a few graphical elements, opting to reimagine the main character as a knight in shining armor who travels across Monsterland, from towns to dungeon depths, attempting to free its people from the terror of the Mecha Dragon. You'll gather money from enemies, buy armor and upgrades. This really feels like a sprawling adventure that's not only much longer than you'd expect, but it is pretty challenging too, especially since there's no save or password system in place. You know, I had a childhood friend who loved this game so much, and it took him almost a year to get good at it and finish it. Don't let that scare you or anything. That said, if this game seems too intimidating and you just rather skip it for one of the more modern games in the series, then you can feel safe in the knowledge that the next game in the series is a direct sequel, and even goes as far as letting you play the finale of Monsterland in its opening moments.
Perhaps my earliest memories of the Master System are navigating a crumbling castle of falling blocks and fighting a mechanical dragon as a soundtrack swept me away to a fantasy land. Or should I say a dragon land? Wonder Boy 3: The Dragon's Trap is a direct sequel to Wonder Boy in Monsterland, and it is just as impressive. Defeating the mechanical dragon in the opening moments of the game, our hero becomes cursed and transformed into a scaly green dragon. To restore his human form, he must venture across the land, defeating other dragon bosses once he makes his way through their stage. What makes this action platformer so addicting is the ability to change forms to discover new areas in the game. You'll fly, swim, stick to walls, and break special blocks in various forms of animal warriors. If you've ever played the Shantae series, you'll be familiar with this style of gameplay, but Wonder Boy 3: The Dragon's Trap mastered it over a decade before the first Shantae game would ever be released. One thing that Wonder Boy 3 does that its predecessor didn't is implement a password system for saving, which is ideal after clearing a new portion of the world. The controls are fluid as you power up with different magic and weapons and collect treasure along your adventure. An iconic soundtrack pushes you through each stage as you make your way closer to salvation. Wonder Boy 3 does so many things right in crafting an unforgettable adventure. I used to spend hours just looking at the manual and drawing all the monsters in it. Wonder Boy 3 is an integral part of my childhood, and it helped shape my gaming taste. The game should not only be on top of your list to own, it should be on top of your list to play.
If I had to pick one game on the Master System that would be considered the most iconic, it would be a toss-up between Space Harrier, Phantasy Star, and Shinobi. I absolutely loved the Sega 16 arcade game, so after the disappointment that was the Master System port of Afterburner, this is where my hopes for the future of the Master System rest. I got the game from my grandfather on Christmas Eve 1988, and it was everything and more than I ever imagined it would be. As was typical of the time for console parts of arcade games, the deviations from the source material were numerous. But Shinobi on the Master System is actually pretty notably faithful. It follows the same general gameplay loop, with you as Ninja Master Joe Musashi rescuing hostages on your way to take down a boss. But in the arcade, rescuing the hostages was the primary goal. In the home version, you don't even need to rescue all of them before leaving the level. Of course, it would probably be a good idea to do so, because each hostage will power you up just a little bit, whether it be making your health meter longer or giving you more powerful projectile attacks. One of these hostages might even open up a bonus stage. If you read video game magazines around 1988, the giant detailed ninja sprite right in your face is burned into your memory as an example of the power of the Master System. Nothing could possibly look this good on the NES, right? This is another example of a super tough game. I can't tell you how many days or weeks it took me before I figured out the trick to defeating the boss of the third stage, which consists of rows of these giant statues that slowly creep toward you and force you back into an electric beam. You know, you always hear people talk about NES hard, but to me, Master System games were generally tougher than NES games, thanks to Sega's insistence on giving you limited continues or making you hold down odd button input combinations to let you continue. And that was always a crapshoot thanks to the system's less than optimal D-pad. Challenge aside, Shinobi is one of the more important games on the system, and I think that any owner or fan of the system should have it in their library, whether or not they really love it or not.
Developed by Irem and released initially in 1987 in the arcades, RType was ported to the Master System by Compile just a year later in 1988. Now, RType was ported to many different home consoles and computers, but the Master System version receives the most praise, and for good reason. The 80s were filled with space shooters, so to stick out in an oversaturated genre was no easy task, but RType on the Master System not only managed to do that, but it became one of the greatest games on the console. Initially, the player controls the R9 spaceship that crawls at a snail's pace horizontally, but after picking up a few power-ups, you'll be whizzing around the screen, blasting aliens with no problem. Inspired by the Alien franchise and the aesthetics of artist H.R. Giger that combines machinery with human physiques, RType comes to life with challenging difficulty and unique boss fights. Enemies will attack the player at all angles and speeds as your ship scrolls across the screen. To help with the barrage of enemy forces is an innovative mounted cannon that can be detached and placed on the front or rear of the R9. This adds a layer of strategy to this shoot 'em up that is a handful for even the most experienced gamer. The soundtrack to RType is intense but not overpowering, a great balance to get you into the zone to complete 8 levels of pure action. There's no feeling like seeing the monstrous first boss creep onto the screen with his tail flailing about, signaling to you that this is no ordinary space shooter. From start to finish, RType dazzles gamers with its soundtrack, innovative gameplay, and strategic boss fights. Each level is unique. Each boss fight requires trial and error, and there's even a secret level. RType is one incredible port of an arcade game on the Master System. So there you have it, 10 must-own games for the Sega Master System. I'd like to thank Coury from My Life in Gaming for collabing with me on this project. It is such a fun topic and it was a blast to put this together with him. So viewers, if you haven't yet, make sure you check out My Life in Gaming featuring Coury and Mark. They are 2 phenomenal YouTubers who will educate you on retro gaming and modern gaming. And if you want more Master System madness, well, I did create a video ranking all 273 Master System games that were released in the North American and PAL regions. Viewers, if you haven't yet, make sure you like this video and leave me a comment below. What Master System games do you think should be included in everybody's library? Let me know. And while you're there, make sure you subscribe to this channel. Thanks for watching.